My name is Amy Myers, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to this webinar, Boosting Instruction with Formative Assessment and Accessibility Strategies, brought to you by the California Department of Education. This webinar is the second in a series of Tools for Teachers Shared Practices webinars that will be occurring throughout the school year. We'll share a little more information about the last webinar in our series at the end of today's presentation. Before we hand it off to our very knowledgeable presenters today, we want to address a few housekeeping items. First of all participants are muted and the chat is turned off today, except for that we will be dropping links into the chat from time to time. We will be collecting questions through the Q&A feature in Zoom. Please submit any questions that you might have there, and the presenters will do their best to answer all of your questions during the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. A link to the folder that has a copy of today's slides and a resource guide has been placed in the chat. And that contains all of the links that our presenters are talking about today. And they're available also on the upcoming Training Opportunities webpage on CAASPP.org and ELPAC.org. So that leads us to the next thing. We are recording today's presentation, and the archive of that presentation will be available for download on the CAASPP and ELPAC YouTube page and the CAASPP.org and ELPAC.org Training Opportunities pages. This usually takes a week or two after the meeting for the recording to be available. So with that, we will pass it over to our presenters for today. So please give a warm welcome to them. Tammy, let's hand it off to you first.
Thank you, Amy. Good afternoon. My name is Tammy Saldana. I'm an education programs consultant with the California Department of Education, and I am excited to be here today to present and to hear from California educators on how they use the resources that are available on the Tools for Teachers website. Presenting with me today are Joanna Salazar, who is a program specialist from San Bernardino Unified School District, and Matthew Cowan, who is an academic support coach from Saddleback Unified School District. I'll quickly go over our agenda for today. I will be going over a quick Tools for Teachers overview, including the formative assessment process, so you will know a little about the website and the resources available. Then Joanna will share her story about using the formative assessment strategies that are found in Tools for Teachers in her Formative Assessment Strategies in Action presentation. And Matt will talk about his experience with the Tools for Teachers website and using the accessibility strategies during instruction. We will wrap up this 1-hour webinar with a Q&A session. So please be sure to submit your questions through the Zoom Q&A at any time, and we will answer your questions live during our Q&A session time. And don't forget, there's a link in the chat for accessing today's presentation slides. And there's also in the resource guide is where you'll find those presentation slides. There's also links to resources that our presenters will be talking about today. I'll start with a little introduction about the website Tools for Teachers. Tools for Teachers is an educator-created library of instructional and professional learning resources to guide you in your instruction. For this webinar, we will focus on the instructional resources that are available in Tools for Teachers. And when we refer to instructional resources, we can also use the words lesson plans interchangeably for those terms. These instructional resources and Tools for Teachers are available for English Language Arts, or ELA and literacy, mathematics, and science for California educators. Tools for Teachers has something to offer all grade levels, and specifically, the strategies we will talk about today apply to all grade levels and subject areas. In today's webinar, we will focus on the formative assessment and accessibility strategies that are woven into each Tools for Teachers instructional resource. Now, let me share some foundational information with you about Tools for Teachers. California uses the Smarter Balance assessment system, which provides those end-of-the-year summative assessments that students take, the interim assessments that are available year-round, and there's a third component to the assessment system, the formative assessment component. Tools for Teachers serves as the formative assessment component of the Smarter Balanced Assessment System. Every instructional resource in Tools for Teachers features the formative assessment process through lesson, instruction, and activities. So as you can see, it's very important to highlight the formative assessment process here, as it is the foundation for the resources that we will share with you today. Now, when we refer to the formative assessment process, we want to point out that formative assessment is a deliberate, it's a planned process that is used by both teachers and students during instruction. It provides quality and timely feedback that can be used to adjust teaching and learning so students are better able to reach curricular learning targets and goals. The clover icon you'll see throughout Tools for Teachers, it represents the formative assessment process, and there are attributes or 4 steps. The first one is clarifying intended learning. It's when the teacher is making sure that students understand the learning goals and success criteria. Then there is eliciting evidence. This is when teachers provide opportunities for students to show what they know and what they can do. And then the next attribute is interpreting evidence. It's looking at where learning is progressing through the lesson, and then teachers can perform the last attribute, which is acting on evidence, which means providing feedback and support as needed. Through Tools for Teachers, California educators have the advantage of having access to formative assessment instructional resources or lesson plans that are embedded with these 4 attributes. You'll find links to the formative assessment process flyer, which includes a definition, a video, introduction to the formative assessment process, and a link to the formative assessment strategies in Tools for Teachers, as well as other helpful resources in your resource guide. Now, today, we are focusing on boosting instruction using 2 types of strategies, the formative assessment strategies and the accessibility strategies. Let's talk about the formative assessment strategies. Formative assessment strategies are instructional recommendations that allow teachers to engage their students, check in for understanding, make in-the-moment decisions based on evidence of learning, and build student agency or ownership of their learning. We'll talk a little bit more about these formative assessment strategies and Tools for Teachers in just a moment, and I look forward to hearing Joanna talk about how she found the formative assessment strategies and uses them. So we'll also talk a little bit about the accessibility strategies that are available in Tools for Teachers instructional resources. We'll be hearing from Matt as he talks about them and how he uses accessibility strategies in his instruction. We define accessibility strategies as instructional recommendations that allow teachers to promote equity in the classroom, provide support to students, and use assessment accessibility supports during instruction. And as I just mentioned, Matt will be sharing how he has experienced using accessibility strategies during instruction. Now, Tools for Teachers can be accessed through the CAASPP website. On CAASPP.org, there is quick link icons on the home page. And one of them says Tools for Teachers. And I should note that the Tools for Teachers button, when selected on CAASPP.org, it takes you to another page that says Tools for Teachers and other formative assessment resources. You may want to check out the resources that are available there and to find more information about training videos, flyers, and other useful information. On that page, there is also a direct link to select to enter the website Tools for Teachers. Now, everyone can enter Tools for Teachers, but to have full access within the website, teachers need to log in. teachers from California Public Schools can log into Tools for Teachers using their Test Operation Management System, or TOMS, information that they receive from their school district. Now, if a teacher has not received their TOMS information for the school year, they can still self-register using their district-issued email. In the resource guide, there's a link to the self-registration flyer if needed. And now, before I turn this presentation over to the other two presenters, let me show you a quick video that looks at the strategies that we're talking about on the Tools for Teachers website. This video will show a quick look at the formative assessment strategies and accessibility strategies available in the Tools for Teachers website. On the home page, there are ways to quickly see lists for each type of strategy. The home page has a Go to the Filter link where strategy lists can be found, and I'll quickly show you the quick links that are available in an expanding bar on the left-hand side of the screen. The gray bar is always available on every Tools for Teachers page, and it expands when the cursor is placed near it. The bar has a list of icons with labels that link. The clover icon indicates the formative assessment strategies, and the silhouette of a person indicates the accessibility strategies. When selected, these links go to a landing page that give a general description of the type of strategy, and there is a link for browsing all of that type of strategy. The Browse All link goes to a list of that type of strategy, and each strategy in that list has its own link that gives teachers step-by-step directions and any other information they may need to know. Now, these strategies are not only found in these lists, but an important part of Tools for Teachers are the lesson plans, also called instructional resources. Every instructional resource in Tools for Teachers has embedded accessibility strategy links and formative assessment strategy links. And that is the focus of our webinar today. So that is a quick look at the formative assessment process and the strategies in Tools for Teachers. I will now turn the presentation over to Joanna, who will share how she uses Tools for Teachers resources.
Thank you, Tammy. Hello, everyone. As Tammy introduced me earlier, my name is Joanna Salazar. And before I talk about the formative assessments and my personal experience with Tools for Teachers, I want to share a little bit about myself and my district. So a little information about my district. I'm from San Bernardino City Unified School District. It's made up of 72 schools across our district grades K through 12. We have over 48,000 students. About 90% of our student population is socioeconomically disadvantaged. We have 21% of our students identified as English learners, and then 12% as special education. A little bit about me. Teaching is my second career. I have 9 years of instructional experience, and previously I was a behavior analyst working within school districts across Southern California. I'm currently a program specialist with elementary instruction, and I was a classroom teacher during COVID, and this kind of connects to my experience with Tools for Teachers. So I was lost, trying to recreate my teaching style and looking for vetted resources to support my classroom instruction. My teaching experience has always been in the testing grades 3 through 12. So I went to that CAASPP website and I just started poking around, clicking on all those green boxes on the CAASPP website, and that's how I came across the Tools for Teachers website. So in my exploration of the Tools for Teachers site, I found instructional resources by searching content area or grade level or standard. And upon further investigation, I've learned a lot about this website and its resources. So I wanted to quickly point out the reasons I feel that this website checks off a lot of what I was looking for. First, all of the instructional resources and Tools for Teachers are standard aligned. So it gives me comfort knowing that these lesson plans are addressing those academic standards that my students need to know. Also, teachers don't have a lot of time, and so we want to find resources that will support them in providing instruction. These resources go through a rigorous vetting process, so they're not just contributed by random contributors. Educators throughout the Smarter Balanced Assessment Consortium, states, including California educators, are trained. They collaborate and author the resources. Then they provide each other feedback using quality criteria and multiple rounds of review. So I felt very confident using these lesson plans with my students. I also found some features in every Tools for Teacher resource that are very valuable. So every resource has a summary with suggested learning goals and success criteria that as teachers, we can use those to clarify the intended learning. They're also embedded in all the resources across all grade levels and content areas. And I also appreciated that the resources often provided classroom materials, answer keys, presentation slide decks, and handouts as attachments. So the step-by-step directions within each resource are really clear. They provide the information teachers need to implement the lesson activities. And then the resources are realistic. In fact, most of them can be implemented within one class period, so that was also beneficial. Another added plus for these instructional resources is that they're linked to the interim assessments. So this is really valuable to know since those interims help give teachers and students information about what students know. And then there's lesson plans available in Tools for Teachers that link to those content assessments by the interim assessment block. And if you want more information about how the interim assessments are linked in Tools for Teachers, you're going to want to register and attend the next webinar in this series, which will be in February. But for today's focus, we're going to share how we use the embedded instructional strategy recommendations that are in every Tools for Teacher resource. So I'll talk about the formative assessment strategies, and then later Matthew will go over how he uses accessibility strategies. So during my self-exploration of Tools for Teachers, I came across the formative assessment strategies. So the website has a bank of 44 formative strategies available for educators. These strategies can be found in the Tools for Teachers in many places on the website. So there are embedded links within all the instructional resources. You can also access the formative assessment strategies through the Clover icon on every page on the left-hand side. The link goes to a list where you can look through all of the available 44 formative assessment strategies and read into each one. They also provide the student benefit for each strategy, the materials that you'll need for the strategy, and then step-by-step instructions on how to implement that assessment strategy. The strategy list is also searchable within the filters available as a type of resource, and the strategies used in a lesson are listed within the strategies used section of each resource. With distance learning, I was trying to reimagine my classroom and different ways that I could assess my students. So this was a great start for me. I was excited to see research-based vetted strategies, and then they were linked through CAASPP, right? So using the formative assessment process, and they were covering all those academic standards. Within each instructional resource, for example, the 6th grade English language art resource, there are embedded formative strategies used in different places of that resource. And Matt will kind of take us through live that in a little time, a little later. There's no need to search all 44 to find the one that fits the lesson because they're already embedded within those lessons. So I remember seeing an English language arts instructional resource where there were 3 strategies embedded during the formative assessment process. So an entrance ticket, an exit ticket, and a think, pair, share. So these strategies may be familiar to you. You may recognize them by different names. So for example, when I was in the classroom, I would use the do now strategy. And then after reading through the description of the entrance ticket, right, I realized that these are the same strategy. So reading that short description can help make those connections, as well as introduce you to new strategies that you might want to try, not only embedded into the resource from Tools for Teachers, but take it out of that resource and apply it to other content areas or assignments that you're doing in your classroom. So post-COVID, I continue to use the resources from Tools for Teachers in my classroom. And now as a curriculum developer and teacher coach, I found ways to embed the Tools for Teachers resource into our district curriculum guides, as well as bringing them up in conversations whenever I'm mentoring teachers on curriculum and assessment strategies. So our curriculum guides are units of instruction that we've developed by teams of teachers and district level employees. On there, we suggest which lessons to use from our adopted materials and other resources, such as tools for teachers, to supplement where our adopted materials may fall short of meeting the standard. And then in coaching opportunities with teachers or groups of teachers, we point out these lessons in our curriculum guides and remind teachers that our tools for teachers are valuable and reliable resources that they can go to. As an example resource for today, Matthew and I are going to use this instructional resource titled Say What? Language Usage and Meaning. This is a 6th grade ELA resource that covers the reading claim, target 7, and 3 grade level standards listed. We picked this resource to show how the formative assessment and accessibility strategies are embedded within Tools for Teachers resources. As stated previously, every instructional resource is embedded with links to formative assessment and accessibility strategies. So the embedded links are the most common way that a teacher can come across the strategies and tools for teachers. When we're scrolling through the resource, a teacher will see that there's purple links with icons within the step-by-step directions. There are 2 types of links within the resource, which are the topic for today's webinar, the formative assessment, and the accessibility strategy. So the clover icon next to a link indicates a formative assessment strategy. The link is placed in an instructional resource where educators that authored the lesson plan recommend a particular formative assessment strategy to be implemented right then and there during that portion of instruction. So this can be helpful for both new and experienced teachers, as it instantly gives you ideas about appropriate ways to gather evidence of student learning and provide engaging activities. So a seasoned teacher can be reminded of the strategies to implement and the beginning teacher can select the link to find more information about the strategy and how to implement it in their classroom. So when we're looking at this resource example that I just mentioned, there are 5 formative assessment strategies embedded into the lesson plan. The first one is an entrance ticket. So this strategy is used to start the class with a short activity. It really gets students thinking about the content. And it's a great way for teachers to quickly elicit evidence of student learning on a particular topic. The second listed is popsicle stick. So this strategy is a way for teachers to randomly select a student or groups of students to elicit responses in a fair and equitable manner. So the teacher poses a question, draws a popsicle stick or another item that has a student name on it or group names written on it. Those selected students then answer the question. So it's an excellent way to keep students engaged. The third one is strategic questioning. So this strategy is a planned, well thought out, higher order questioning strategy that's aligned with the content. So students' responses to higher order questions allow the teacher to ascertain the level and scope of students' understanding in the moment during instruction. The fourth one is a gallery walk. So this strategy is a discussion technique that allows students to be actively engaged as they walk through the classroom. So they can share ideas and respond to meaningful questions, documents, images, problem-solving situations, or text individually or in small groups. And the fifth one is an exit ticket. So the exit ticket strategy, sometimes called an exit flip, or a reflection or a closing, is a question or a problem or even a task that is posed to all students prior to class ending, and it helps students take ownership of their learning. Tammy was talking about that student agency. So that it has them reflect on their understanding of the content and create student agency as their voice is considered. So this example outlines how putting these formative assessment strategies into action can help boost instruction. The provided recommendations help in saving teachers time, in finding quality lesson plans that address the students' need to learn. And so this is my experience with Tools for Teachers and a closer look at the formative assessment strategies that are available on the Tools for Teachers site. I'm now going to turn the presentation over to Matthew, who's going to talk about the accessibility strategies that are included in the Tools for Teachers resources.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Joanna. I'm so grateful to be here. And before I discuss accessibility strategies, I just wanted to share a little bit about myself that you may want to know. First off, my name is Matthew Cowan, and I've been in the educational arena for approximately 12 years. I've enjoyed a wonderful mix of working directly with both students and teachers alike. I've taught everything from honors level courses, reading intervention, sheltered courses, as well as targeted foster youth students. Currently, I'm a site-based academic support coach. I have been provided this amazing opportunity to impact instruction by collaborating in a partnership with teachers to develop instructional practices with the widest and longest lasting impact. I'm looking forward to sharing my honest and authentic experiences with accessibility strategies within Smarter Balanced Tools for Teachers. I've had the privilege of working in resource authoring as a state network educator, otherwise known as an S&E, for almost 10 years now. The State Network of Educators are groups of educators from across the Smarter Balanced Assessment Consortium who are trained to contribute and review instructional and professional learning resources for inclusion in the Smarter Balanced Tools for Teachers website. I had the fortuitous luck to attend a breakout session for Tools for Teachers back when it was titled The Digital Library during a state teaching conference. Here I am over a decade later, immersed in the work of formative assessment strategies and accessibility strategies and supports. When I realized that this work and slate of teacher resources centered around teachers helping other teachers be successful, I was 1000% all in. I currently participated in over a dozen workshops where I've had the privilege to leverage the expertise of educators from all over the United States. Now I'd like to share a little bit about my current district educational setting and populations. Currently, I'm in Saddleback Valley Unified School District, which is located approximately 50 miles south of Los Angeles in the heart of Orange County, California. We are one of the largest districts in the county with 34 total schools. We've seen recently an appreciable jump in both English learners as well as students of socioeconomically disadvantaged status over the past few years. A main reason I believe that Tools for Teachers is a phenomenal educational resource is because the resources address almost all of the population that my district, as well as many others, serve on a day-to-day basis. When thinking about the summative assessments, many teachers are familiar with the 3 tiers of supports listed in the usability, accessibility, and accommodations guidelines document that is available to all teachers. Well, Tools for Teachers has thoughtfully provided teachers with embedded accessibility strategies that help teachers provide these accessibility supports during their instruction. There are essentially 3 tiers of accessibility strategies found in Smarter Balanced Tools for Teachers resources library, and the appropriate tier is listed in each accessibility page. These tiers are exceptionally helpful and support teachers in making the most informed and in-the-moment decisions on accessibility that are best for their specific students. The tiers are as followed. Tier 1 is for universal tools. These are accessibility strategies that are available for all of our students to use. These are strategies such as providing a digital notepad, built-in brain breaks, scratch paper, line reader, as well as strike-through chunking. Tier 2 is for designated supports. These are supports that the teacher might provide select students. Tier 2 accessibility strategies are more targeted and are often selected in a PLC, professional learning community, or team-like setting. Tier 2 strategies are ones like color contrast and text-to-speech, for just a few examples. Tier 3 strategies are even more targeted accommodations. They are provided for students with 504s and IEPs, otherwise known as individual education plans, and they are selected in either an IEP and/or SST team-like setting. There are currently 73 accessibility strategies housed amongst the Tools for Teachers resources. As mentioned earlier in Joanna's fantastic presentation on formative assessment strategies, you can access these strategies as embedded links in the actual resources themselves, in the icon links at the left-hand bar of every page, by searching in the filters, and in the list within the resource itself. One of the things that I appreciate the most about these strategies is that you can locate them in a predictable and a wholly intuitive fashion. There are multiple ways to access them, as well as their descriptions and ease of use. So let's take a quick look at these strategies Joanna and I have been talking about today. I'm going to share my screen and show you a sample resource about how these strategies are embedded in them. This is a 6th grade language arts lesson that is focusing on language use and meaning. I've supported teachers using this exact resource. All of the resources and tools for teachers use the same robust process for adding strategies, and this one is one of my favorites. There are 3 accessibility strategies used in this resource. As a general rule, each resource contains approximately 2 to 4 formative assessment strategies, as well as 2 to 4 accessibility strategies. The resources want to provide enough choice for educators, however, not so much choice as to overwhelm the intended user. The first accessibility strategies is right here, the highlighter tool. This can be something as simple as providing students with physical highlighters to mark their texts, or a digital highlighter tool will suffice if providing students with digital versions of their texts. The second accessibility strategy is the line reader tool. This is an on-screen universal tool to assist in student reading by moving the line tool over each line of the text as students read. The third accessibility strategy demonstrated here are the color overlay option. This is another one of my favorites because of its relative simplicity of use. The instructor will provide color clear transparencies placed over a paper document or text to support student learning and access the text. So that is a quick demo of where you can find some of those resources. In summary, I will highlight the accessibility strategies in the resource that I just previously quickly demonstrated. In this specific resource, the accessibility strategies are located embedded in the work time portion of the instructional resources. Other tools for teachers resources might place their accessibility strategies in different portions of the instructional resource itself. When in doubt, you can always check the left-hand side of the resource and scroll up or down and find the section that clearly states accessibility strategies. Hyperlinks with helpful short descriptions are provided within the scope of the resource itself as well. When using accessibility strategies within the tools for teachers resources, it's important to make sure that the selections that you ultimately choose end up supporting the targeted students that you see each and every day in your classroom. For example, when using a strategy such as the color contrast or the line reader, it's important to be intentional about the when and the why you are using those strategies with your students. Like almost everything in our classroom and in educational settings, the more you know about your individual students, the more targeted and effective the universal tools and accessibility strategies that you selected will ultimately be. I often personally get inspiration and ideas for additional accessibility resource supports to add in addition to the ones that are specifically provided in the tools for teachers resources. There's so much support and flexibility in the process that I always feel 100% confident each and every time I go back and use the resources. Oftentimes, I will provide universal tools and many other designated supports for almost all of the learners that I come in contact with. Oftentimes, good instruction is just that, and good for almost all of our kiddos. In addition to the accessibility strategies that are already embedded in the Say What instructional resources, I have often supplemented those with bilingual dictionaries and/or illustration glossaries. These are both relatively simple as additions. Since I'm often closely working with English learners, these two additional accessibility strategies work in tandem with the accessibility strategies already provided within the instructional resource itself, which are the highlighter the color overlays, as well as the line reader. The wonderful thing about these additional strategies is that they are easily located in the main Tools for Teachers page after you initially log in. Like many of us already know, best practices are excellent for one set of learners. As I just mentioned, they're almost always good for all. Accessibility strategies are just one other way of leveraging the diversity of our student population by making sure that all of our students find success and learning in their journey and progressions. The formative assessment that Joanna outlined, as well as the accessibility strategies housed in Tools for Teachers, are helping to evolve my current pedagogical practices each and every passing day. I consult these resources almost daily when working with staff and students alike. Thank you so very much for the opportunity to share with each and every one of you today. I will now turn the presentation back over to Tammy so we can answer questions that have been recently submitted through the question and answer feature.
Thank you, Matthew, and thank you, Joanna. We appreciate you taking the time to share with us today. And we do have some questions that I can't wait to get to, but before we get into some Q&A, we would like to let you know about the next webinar in this series. All of these webinars are collaborations with folks from California schools and districts, and we're really excited to work with people who are really using the tools and are willing to share their practices so that we can all benefit. You can find these under the trainings on CAASPP.org and ELPAC.org. They all have separate registration, so make sure to go to and register. And coming on February 21st, we have a webinar about supporting student success with interim assessments and tools for teachers. That's the webinar that Joanna was talking about. We hope that you will join us for that final webinar in our Tools for Teachers Shared Practices series. And now we have some time to answer your questions. Let's start with one that I marked for answering the question live. We have a question about are there resources that are specifically designed for English learners or students in special education with individual education plans or IEPs? I'll explain very briefly how the Tools for Teachers instructional resources are designed. Every instructional resource is written at grade level with universal design for learning in mind. And within the instructional resources are considerations for the needs of diverse learners. We're talking about students that may be in foster care, homeless students, English learners, students with individual education plans or IEPs, students on 504s. All of these students are having diverse needs that a teacher should consider. So we have a things to consider section in every single instructional resource. There's also instructional moves that are put in there, as well as we're talking about today, these embedded strategies. There are formative assessment strategies, can be used to check in with students, make sure they're accessing the content and understanding what's going on throughout the instruction. Those formative assessment strategies are a great way to keep people supported and engaged. And then the accessibility strategies. We think of accessibility, sometimes we think of only students with IEPs, but the accessibility strategies can be used to help any student to support their learning. For instance, sentence frames can be an accessibility strategy where students fill in a blank in a sentence. This can support a student who has maybe a reading disability, but it can also support an English learner by providing that support, the context around it, and being able to express what they know and what they can do in a formative way. So that's the answer to that. There are no specific resources right now for ELs or special education, but we have very carefully crafted these resources in order for teachers to consider the needs of diverse students. Hopefully that answers your question. A quick reminder is that Tools for Teachers is not an actual curriculum. It's meant to be a supplemental resource for teachers, for helping teachers to make instructional choices and be able to support students in their needs. I also wanted to point out very quickly that there's a list of formative assessment strategies and accessibility strategies. We only used one example today, and so those embedded strategies are not the only strategies in Tools for Teachers. The best way is to go in and investigate Tools for Teachers. I'm looking at the questions, and I see one for Matt, and there's a question about where to find the designated supports of illustration glossaries upload. We wanted to add this to some of our ELLs, and so that's a technical question that we can follow up with you. If it says anonymous attendee, you may want to give us your email so we can follow up and help you to provide the supports that you're talking about. I see that we have someone that's typing an answer to that. Actually, he says he wants to answer it live. I'm going to turn it over to Tyler. Tyler, would you like to answer more about that?
Yeah. Thanks, Tammy. This is Tyler Shockway. I work for ETS. And so I think what this person's asking about is how to actually set this, the illustration glossary support in TOMS. And this one tricks a lot of people. It's actually under translation glossaries as one of the options. So translation glossaries include, there's Spanish and other language glossaries, but illustration is one of those options. So if you look in that Excel template that I think you're talking about, if you look for translation glossaries first, then you'll see illustration as one of those options.
Thank you. All right, would you recommend using these resources for intervention programs? If so, how? So for intervention programs, we're talking about students that may need a little more support, or they may need to reteach, or sometimes people call intervention programs for even just expanding and challenging students that might be at risk of not participating. And so intervention programs have a wide definition. And yes, we do recommend that these instructional resources be used for all students. They're designed for any student, and it can be adapted for, we always assume that a teacher will look at an instructional resource, think of the students they have in their classroom, and adapt it to meet their needs. It's designed with recommendations, with embedded strategies, things to consider, knowing that teachers are the ultimate professionals that will make those instructional decisions. All right, let me look a little bit more about this. We have questions about specific accessibility strategies, which we can answer. If at any time you can go into Tools for Teachers, and someone was asking if I could show how to get to instructional resources. So I'm going to share my screen and show you how to find instructional resources. I'm hoping that you see my screen. It doesn't have a green line. Matt, can you give me a thumbs up if you see my screen? We do. Okay. So here's the Tools for Teachers landing page. And on the landing page are several places that you can use to get to instructional resources. In my little video that I created, I mentioned the expanding gray bar on the left-hand side, and these are the icons that can take you to instructional resources, the lists of strategies that we talked about today. And I can go there and I can search, or I can do a keyword search. Let's say I'm only interested in grade 4. I can type in grade 4. Let's say I'm only interested in learning about verbs. I'm going to teach verbs. I can type in a keyword search. I can also go to the filter. Go to the filter links, takes me to a place where I can filter by type of resource. I can filter by subject area. I can search by claims, targets, and standards. And I think we're all in tools for teachers right now, and it's given me a little bit of weight here. There we go. I can select the type of resource I want to find. I would select instructional, and let's say I want to go to high school. I saw someone asking about high school resources. I can go to the filter and I can search for high school resources after selecting those filters. And then I can scroll through the list of instructional resources that are available for the filters that I have selected. I selected high school now. I can select English language arts, mathematics, or science. I'm going to go with ELA. And at any time, I can go to the list here, and it has a list that shows the title, the subject area, as well as the claims, targets, and standards that are addressed by these resources, along with a summary. So it's a great resource to find these instructional resources. And once again, all of these resources have the same structure. There's an outline where teachers can jump to the sections of the resource, the step-by-step, any attachments they may need, accessibility strategies that were used, things for the teacher to consider, and the formative assessment process and how this particular lesson plan uses the formative assessment process, including the strategies that were used. And along the right side, we do have the data that tells us the claim, target, and standards that are covered. So that is a quick way of showing you how to get to resources to whoever asked. I hope that helps. I think, let me look, I'm going to stop share. And I'm looking at the questions. Are there lessons with resources for CAA? So once again, the person that asked that question, this is again talking about using a resource with a person or a student with diverse needs. And in thinking of students that are using the CAA, which is the California Alternate Assessment, what this student would probably have an IEP or a 504, and this person, the student would, the lessons could be used with that student, but the teacher would have to take that student's needs in mind and adjust the instructional resource instruction according to the way that the student needs to be presented the content. So again, we present the resources at grade level, and we have considerations that are embedded throughout the lesson plan. And we assume that teachers will know their students and adapt the instructional recommendations according to their student needs. All right. I do see that there is someone that has technical questions, and if you are a testing coordinator, you can always reach out to the California Technical Assistants. We call them CalTAC, and there's a link to the LEA success agents that are available to coordinators. If you're a teacher, we encourage you to reach out to your your administration on site or to your testing coordinator, and you can find how to register for Tools for Teachers, how to get in using your Tom's login, or make sure if you're trying to self-register that you're using a district email. But we're hoping that everybody enjoys using Tools for Teachers. There's a lot of educators throughout the Smarter Balanced Assessment Consortium, including California educators, who have worked very hard to provide quality instructional resources and lesson plans that implement the formative assessment process and cover the academic content standards, the things that students need to know and can do. And really, it's not fluff and stuff. It's something that we know is a quality resource when you're going in here and looking at these. They've gone through, as Joanna mentioned, a vetting process and a collaboration process that makes these instructional resources a good thing to use. All right, so I'm looking through the questions one more time. And I'll, as I'm looking through these questions, I'll refer to Matt and Joanna and ask them if they have any thoughts as we are winding down our webinar today. I'll start with Matt. Matt, do you have anything that you would like to add on?
Sure. I just thought I would just suggest that the summative assessments and the Tools for Teachers, while they do work closely together and they inform each other, they're two separate systems sometimes. And a lot of the, accessibility strategies, it's not a perfect one-to-one match within the summative assessment, the TOMS. And so I often get a lot of ideas for accessibility strategies from what's already listed in that list. I think somebody had a question about, finding digital highlighter tools. And one of the things I do is I always think, very basic, because I want it to be like replicable across instruction. And one of the things I do for digital highlighter is I transfer the text into a Google Doc, and then I distribute that to students, and then it's easy to use like a highlighter function. They can drag and drop over the text, and then that serves that function. There are other platforms out there, that I don't really want to speak to specifically, but there's a lot of ways to, use the spirit of a lot of these strategies and not have to like reinvent the wheel. And I think that's one of the crucial things that I've learned from using Tools for Teachers, is that they're amazing vetted resources by educators. And then it also sparks something inside of me that I wouldn't have had sparked had I not had access to these tools. So it's one of the other reasons I wanted to share how they've been so useful to me.
Thank you, Matt. And Joanna, do you have any final thoughts or anything you would like to share?
Thank you, Tammy. Yeah, I would just say, similar to Matthew, right? I think the more time you spend exploring the resources, the more you become almost passionate about it, right? You just find the value in so much on the Tools for Teachers website, because there's so much there outside of just the two main things that we shared with you today. So I just think it's, if anything, at least, right, go in there and try to explore some of what's there, because you'll find that there's so much there. And like we've all been saying, right, those vetted resources, it's just the comfortability knowing that you're getting some good stuff.
Thank you, Joanna. I have had administrators share with me that this is a little golden nugget that they've found in the treasure of assessment tools that are out there. And if you happen to be someone that does training or leads professional learning, make sure you give your teachers some time to explore, because teachers are very, very busy. And once they have had time to explore these resources, they may find things that they're little treasures in Tools for Teachers. There's a lot to offer. Today, we went over the instructional resources and the strategies embedded. And next time we meet, we're going to talk a little, we're going to have people share how they use the instructional resources along with the interim assessments that are available in the Smarter Balanced Assessment System, which we are hoping that you will join us for. So I'm going to wrap up this webinar, look at the Q&A really quickly. I know throughout the webinar, we have had the link to the resource guide dropped in several times. Make sure that you copy that link. It has a copy of the slides for today, and we are recording this, and in a couple of weeks, the recording will be available on the training tab on CAASPP.org and ELPAC.org. You can go to the past trainings and materials, and you'll find the recording in about 2 weeks or so. And I think with that, we will wrap up our webinar. We want to thank everyone for coming today, and we hope to see you in February. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks everyone for coming. Have a wonderful day.